Thank you, Lawrence. I have to tell you, I love the music that we pick, and I was jamming to that one. Miley Cyrus, I Can Buy My Own Flowers. So today I am playing the role of Steve Ortiz, who is the person who introduced us to our clients and esteemed guests. So I want to give a little bit of a background on who they are, and then we'll bring them on and read their bios. But so I'm delighted today to have Jennifer White Reid, who is the Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor, and Teal Zunza, who is a licensed clinical social worker and Associate Vice President of the of Justice Innovations at the Urban Resource Institute. We are grateful to both of them for their participation as their guests as our Women's History Month special webinar. URI is a leading nonprofit organization dedicated to breaking cycles of poverty, violence, and inequity while strengthening individuals, families, and communities through comprehensive, life-changing programs. Their work has a lasting impact on some of our most vulnerable populations, and their mission aligns deeply with our shared commitment to access, equity, and empowerment. URI has also been a valued client of Mutual of America since 2023. As I mentioned, Steve Ortiz brought them to us, and we're proud of supporting their organizations through multiple retirement plan offerings, including 403Bs, TDAs, and 401k plans. URI's a testament to URI's dedication to their long-term financial security, for providing long-term financial security to its workforce. So I do want to thank Steve, who I said is unfortunately not able to be with us today. He's off with a client meeting, for extending the invitation, and really thank him for his partnership and support of our inclusion programs, but so many people who are on the staff who provide guidance and help us make these collaborations happen. So Jennifer and Teal, since you're with me now, I'm gonna read your bios, but I actually just wanna, I pulled on your website, so I just want to kind of read the mission more clearly directly from your website. So I pulled your vision and mission. The vision is a world free of domestic violence, homelessness, poverty, and trauma, where individuals and communities are safe and stable and thriving. And your mission is to empower individuals, families, and communities, particularly communities of color and other disenfranchised populations, to end cycles of violence, homelessness, poverty, and trauma by increasing safety and resilience. I will say that I really appreciate you being here. I don't think I said this to my team, but my mom was a survivor of domestic abuse when I was younger and found her way out of the situation. And so I have a great respect for the work that you do and a great respect for the men and women. I know people talk about mostly women, but men as well. So the constituents that you support. So let me tell them who you are, and then we'll jump into some questions. So Jennifer, raise your hand. It's Jennifer. Jennifer has dedicated 20 years to the advancement of the empowerment and well-being of underserved individuals and families. As the Chief of Staff and Senior Advisor to the CEO of the Urban Resource Institute, URI, Jennifer serves as a strategic thought partner driving alignment across administration, programming, funding, and policy priorities. She oversees the execution of the organizational initiatives, manages the CEO's office, and liaises with the board of directors to advance URI's mission. Previously, Jennifer served as URI Senior Vice President of Domestic Violence Residential and Legal Programs, where she led the expansion of the emergency and transitional housing and launched innovative initiatives, including the nationally recognized, which my team loved, People and Animals Living Safely, or PALS program. A respected advocate and public speaker on intimate partner violence, she has served on numerous boards and committees, including the New York City Coalition on Domestic Violence Residential Providers and the New York State Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Jennifer holds a BA in psychology and a certificate in executive leadership from NYU. She earned her law degree from Fordham University School of Law, where she was a Stein Scholar, and her numerous honors include the Honorable Deborah A. Bates Life of Commitment Award, the Lewis Lefkowitz Public Service Award and recognition as a advocate by the advocate of New York City by the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and gender-based violence. So thank you, Jennifer. And I know it's not easy to have people reading stuff about you, so thank you for sitting there as I read all about you.
I appreciate it.
Teal,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Teal is the Associate Vice President of Justice Initiatives at URI, where she leads a portfolio of programs designed to address the root causes of domestic violence, homelessness, and economic injustice. In this role, she oversees a team of 10 programs with a combined budget of $7 million, including the People and Animals Living Safely, PALS, program, economic empowerment program, legal services, clinical support, client victim services, and prevention and intervention initiatives. Reporting to Amanda Eckhard, the Chief Program Officer, in Inzunza, serves as a member of URI's senior leadership team. A nationally recognized advocate for economic justice and survivor-centered systems change, Teal previously served as the director of URI's Economic Empowerment Program. Over the past 5 years, she has helped to advance innovative strategies that support survivors in rebuilding financial stability, addressing coerced debt, and navigating housing and public benefit systems, and expanding services for LGBTQ survivors. Beyond her work at URI, she is a leader in the growing national movement to address the economic impacts of abuse. She co-chairs the New York City Domestic Violence and Economic Justice Task Force, co-founded the Economic Justice for Survivors Collaboration, and is an active member of the National Coerced Debt Working Group. Her thought leadership includes published reports and op-eds on economic justice and survivor empowerment, including reinvesting in economic justice and equity and solidarity for survivors in New York City. In recognition for her work, she received the Systems Change Award from Her Justice in 2023 and the Changemaker Award from the Anti-Violence Program in 2020. Earlier in her career, she established the Transgender and Gender Nonconforming Leadership Academy at the Anti-Violence Project, a program designed to empower NGNC survivors as leaders in the movement for justice and equity. You hold your Bachelor's of Arts in Social Work and Master's in Social Work from Fordham University's Graduate School of Social Services. Thank you, Teal, for being here as well. So I'm going to jump into my, I was going to say Oprah Winfrey moment, but Oprah's been off the air for like 30 years, so I'm going to jump into my Kelly Clarkson moment instead. Someone, and Lawrence, I'm going to just shout out for a second. Someone's asking if we have captions for the webinar. I'm not sure if Lawrence, maybe someone can jump in and put in the Q&A how one might be able to do that, or if we have that or not. But I just want to make sure whoever asked that question knows that we saw it. So Jennifer, I'm going to start with you, but I'll ask you both similar questions. Your career spans more than 20 years of advocating for underserved individuals and families. What originally inspired your commitment to this work, and how does that passion continue to shape your leadership at URI?
Tara, thank you for that question. And thank you for inviting us to join you today during Women's History Month. It's truly an honor to be part of this moment to reflect and to celebrate, one that recognizes the sort of the strength, the resilience, and the contributions of women in this community. So thank you for the invitation. I'm especially grateful for the opportunity to share more about our work in this field. We often feel like we're behind the scenes, so moments like this really truly matter. They give us a chance to not only shine a spotlight and highlight our impact that we're making in the world, but to also elevate the extraordinary commitment of the team behind the scenes, right? Those who are doing the work every single day, who show up every day with expertise and compassion for the people and communities that we serve. So thank you for your partnership, for your interest in this work, and for creating space for us to have this conversation. So just a little background on URI. For over 45 years, URI has been working to serve the interests of the community, and we've been focusing on ending domestic violence and homelessness. URI is, as you mentioned earlier, the largest provider of domestic violence shelter services in the country and a leading provider of temporary housing for families experiencing homelessness. We serve about 4,000 adults and children and pets on any given night in about 26 residential programs that we have across New York City, and about 40,000 people annually in all of our programs. And that includes the Justice Initiative programs that Teal oversees that we'll spend a little bit of time. I know Teal will talk about them a lot. What drew me to this work and kept me here for so many years, I've been doing this work for over 20 years, was a deep belief that everyone deserves to feel safe, and that is physically, emotionally, and with dignity. Early in my career, I saw firsthand that many individuals and families, and that included families, that included people in my own family, were navigating systems that weren't always designed with their needs in mind. So what stayed with me was not just the challenges that people experienced, but also the resilience, the courage, the determination to really build a life for themselves, a better life for themselves and for their children. And so that experience grounded my commitment to this work. It continues to shape how I show up as a leader every day at URI. Safety, and we talk about safety all the time. Safety is a foundation, a starting point for
Given
healing.
right, isn't it? It's really a given
Absolutely.
right.
Yeah, it's the starting point for healing, stability, and opportunity when we create environments that allow for people to feel safe, truly safe. We open the door for everything else, access to resources and services, abilities to make choices for themselves, and a chance to rebuild their lives and thrive. And so I just lastly wanted to say, as a leader, I carry those early experiences with me every day. I'm reminded to center the voices of the people that we serve and also to support our team, right, who's doing this work with compassion and excellence, and to keep pushing systems, right? So we need to keep pushing systems to make them more responsive, more equitable, and more humane. This isn't just a professional job for me. This is also deeply personal, and it's a privilege to be able to work with colleagues like Teal in creating pathways where people are not defined by their worst, most difficult moments, but are supported in reaching their full potential.
Yeah, thank you. Teal, I'm going to ask you the same question about your passion. I'll also just say in between, um, and most people who are on the call have been on the call before, but I'll just kind of remind everyone, we we've been doing this Heritage and Awareness series since 2022. Last year and this year, we have focused on shining a light on our clients because unless you're really kind of in a client-facing sales role, we don't get to see you. Like, so my team would never have met either of you. And I think it's so important for our employees to understand, as I say, who we work for, right? And who we're supporting. And so the way that you talk about the passion for the work that you do and the constituents that you serve and the team of people behind you really reminds everyone on this call and those who are going to watch it later why we do what we do. Because it really is to support the passion that you have. So Teal, I'll ask you the same question. What has shaped your passion around leadership in this space?
Yeah, thank you, Tara, and thank you for having us. Jennifer gives such a great overview of URI and the work we do. Yeah, I think similar to what Jennifer said, I um, growing up experienced housing insecurity, experienced violence as a child, as a Mexican American person living in America, really witnessed a lot of violence in my community or towards my community, and still to this day, we see that. And I think I learned a lot from the women in my family. I was thinking about Women's History Month, and many of my tias or my aunts are really strong advocates for the community. I think, like, one of my aunts was like organizing farm workers in California when she was young, and thinking about the legacy that a lot of the women in our families leave for us. That has always felt really intrinsic to me, and something that I think I hold really dear, that like while, and my aunts often say to me, you never know what side of the desk you're going to be on. Today, you could be on the side of the desk providing the support. Tomorrow, you could be on the side needing the support. And I always hold that really, really dear. I have been lucky enough to have a bunch of life experiences that led me to this point where I get to sit here and advocate for those who need support. Um, and it could have easily been different for me. So, I really deeply believe that every individual deserves safety, deserves a house, somewhere to live, and deserves the financial freedom to be safe. We speak a lot about how there's no safety without economic security. And I think for a lot of folks, yeah, having a temporary place to stay is super important. And that long-term safety and stability is something worth fighting for, and something we hope that every individual is able to access, and especially the children that we're working with get that safe space to land. Um, and I think throughout our work at URI and the Justice Initiatives Department, we're not only focusing on that direct service, but we're looking at systems. What systems need to change in order for people to feel like they can move forward? We know that people are not the problem, the systems are the problem. They're creating circumstances where people are stuck in homelessness or in domestic violence, and there aren't always opportunities for people to seek safety. So how can we set up our systems to really be able to support survivors and support people who need it the most in moving forward with their life? So that's sort of, yeah, my overview.
So you both mentioned systems. I'm wondering that now we're going to do a toss up, so either one of you can answer. We'll figure out who does one question. But before I get to kind of my next question, I'm wondering if you could maybe just get really kind of tactical for me for a second. You mentioned systems. What are the systems? What help us to, because I think that people don't understand the systems that can encumber someone if they don't encounter them, right? So how do you, what are some of the examples of the ways that the system is a part of this? Yeah, Jennifer.
I'm happy to take it, and then Teal will gladly add to that.
I'll let Teal do the next question. You take that one, and then I'll give
Sure.
Teal
No,
question.
it's just it's similar to what sort of we're going to talk about a little bit later too, which is just the challenges that our clients face. So one big challenge is having to navigate multiple systems at the same time, and at a time when you're experiencing trauma. So what that can look like is housing, trying to find affordable, accessible housing in a short period of time, trying to access the court system, how to navigate that and do so safely, understanding what your rights are, having to navigate the public benefit system, right? And medical services, having to navigate childcare. Trying to find low cost childcare in New York City is very challenging. And then employment. We have clients who have worked all their life and have to leave their jobs and start from scratch. We have folks who haven't had the ability to focus on themselves and even think about careers. And being in our program allows them the safety and the freedom to sort of pause for a moment, take a breath, and think about careers. And then what does that look like? Internship opportunities, potentially, just being exposed to what your interests are. And so there are multiple systems all having to be engaged at the same time. Often, they don't communicate with one another, right? And sometimes there are conflicts, and harm can be caused to those that we serve if there aren't resources like an organization like URI to assist people through those systems.
Yeah, thank you. So Teal, you are obviously meeting your survivors at some of the most vulnerable moments of their lives. What are the most challenging aspects of providing the support for them? The emotional, the legal, the financial, the housing. What's What's the most challenging aspect of that? And actually, I'll ask you about it kind of more from, again, from assistance perspective. So what's most challenging about that? But I'm just curious about the team of people you work with. Um, what's, tell me a little bit about that too.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'll kind of build off of what Jennifer was saying, and maybe I'll give you like an example of like a client and how they might go through the different systems, because I think that kind of illustrates what we're saying. I oversee most of our non-residential programs, so they provide services to many of the people living in the shelter, but they're a little bit like more removed from the day-to-day, like in the shelter. They provide like kind of that long-term support. But when you're thinking about a survivor, right, when they're thinking about leaving a person who's causing them harm, they don't have many options because the system isn't set up to support someone in accessing a variety of options. When we're thinking about trauma-informed care, choice is a huge part of that. There aren't a ton of choices. There aren't many beds available to domestic violence survivors, and the beds that are available are primarily open to families, which is great. We want people with children to be able to access the system, but 50% of the callers to the New York City domestic violence hotline are single individuals seeking shelter. There aren't that many single spaces, so people looking to get access to a safe space struggle with that. Often when someone's leaving an abusive relationship, they have a variety of different barriers, and there are a lack of resources to address those barriers. And those are what we try to address in our programs. One example is what Jennifer said. Maybe somebody, as a part of the abuse they experienced, was not allowed to work, was not allowed to access their bank accounts, or had somebody set up credit cards or debt in their name without their knowledge, or even with their knowledge, and ran up a ton of debt in their name. In New York State, there was no legal way to get released from that debt until very recently. We just passed a bill, we're very excited about it, that allows for people to go through a process to be able to be released from that debt. Because if you have a lot of debt and your credit score is poor, it's very hard to find housing in New York City and anywhere. So much of our housing system depends on your credit score. So many people aren't working, can't pay off a debt that was no fault of their own, and then can't find housing. In order to be in shelter, many people need to be on a public benefits case. So they often need to stop working if they are working to be able to qualify for public benefits. All of the housing programs that exist in New York City are, almost all of them are public benefits based. So if you don't have an open public benefits case, you can't receive housing support.
So
Of
if
course,
you're wealthy, then you can't get support.
yeah, they're income limited. So many people have to stop working in order to qualify for a housing program, which is, this is why we're talking about these systems are set up to keep people in certain situations. And it doesn't allow for people who are working to really access them. We have a rapid rehousing program that actually does work with working individuals and provides them, they pay 30% of their income towards the rent. So that's one example of one of the ways we're trying to like intervene in the system. When people are looking for housing, often landlords don't want to take vouchers. And so that becomes a problem. There's like, I could go on and on and on about the ways in which people are often, held back from moving forward because of these rules that exist at various levels. And I think I would be remiss to also not mention, which Jennifer mentioned, like legal situations. There's often custody cases. We support with a lot of immigration cases, many forms of abuses to like withhold legal status from a survivor. And so our legal team works with someone to be able to provide them with the legal representation that they need to get to where they're going. And then similarly, like mental health care is super expensive, even with insurance. And so access to healing services like mental health support, which we offer in our shelters, and all of our staff are really trained to support people on that healing journey, is hard, and like the work part of it, if somebody hasn't been allowed to work, not having work history is really tough for somebody to get employment. Our economic empowerment program works with people to get them paid internships. We pay them to do an 8-week internship, get some experience, and really like have that to put on their resume so they can find employment and can move forward. But there's just a lot of pitfalls of all of these things, sort of as I was illustrating. Yeah, so that was a long answer to your question. But
No, it's a helpful answer because I do, like I said, you don't know, you just don't know, right? And that's part of what we want to do here.
Mhm.
And you talked about people leaving with their families,
mhm.
and the word family is quite broad. And so you do the PALS program, People and Animals Living in Shelter and Safety, and it's a nationally recognized program allowing survivors to enter their shelter with pets. And I don't have a pet now, but I grew up with a little cat. And I, that I feel like I always tell my story through these stories, but like my little cat used to like follow my mom around. And when my father was not being good, it was that little cat that like laid at her feet at night. And we didn't have to leave the house. We ended up staying. And but I imagine that when people are making the decisions to leave, the idea of taking your dog, your cat, your bird, your whatever, who's your family, and leaving them in that situation has got to be something that makes people say, I just can't, right? And they're willing to just sacrifice because that's a part of their family. So I would love if you could tell us about your program, and some of the success stories that best demonstrated the positive impact of the PALS program and how it's changed survivors' desire, access, to finding safety through your programs. Teal, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I was gonna.
Well, whose program is this? This is actually you, right?
I can start and
You
then I'll
start.
pass it.
Okay,
I'll pass it to Teal.
let's tag team.
Um, but we love talking about pals. So as you said, for many people, pets are family. So people who have had pets, who understand the human animal bond, a light bulb goes off when they think about working with survivors of domestic violence and those who are experiencing homeless. They go, oh, I didn't realize that there was this gap, right? So for too long, the bond has actually been a barrier to safety. And so we work with survivors who've delayed accessing safety, remained in a dangerous situation because they could not bear to leave their pets behind, knowing what the real risk was. What PALS does, again, it removes the barrier, allows survivors to come into our domestic violence shelters and also now our homeless family shelters. It allows them to make the decision to seek safety sooner and with that greater peace of mind because they don't have to choose between picking who their family members are, right? Protecting themselves and protecting a beloved companion. So for many, many years, we worked with adults and child survivors who were grieving the loss of their pets when they were coming into shelter. And in 2012, we started to do research and learned from research that there was a study that showed that 48% of victims of domestic violence would remain in a dangerous situation out of fear of leaving their pet behind because there were no spaces. There were no safe spaces for the entire family to come into New York City shelters. No shelter in New York City, domestic violence shelter, allowed families to come in with pets. And our state regulations were silent and speak to whether it was allowed or not. And so we as an organization recognized that there was this gap and we wanted to do something about it. We were committed to ensuring that we worked alongside our government partners, we worked alongside survivors, the animal welfare community, and our staff to design a program that would be responsive, and of course safety was at the center of everything because we do have individuals who are in our residential programs who do not have pets, right? So we were really thoughtful about making sure the program worked well, and the impact has been profound. We've seen an increased utilization of families coming in with pets. More importantly, we've seen a shift in how survivors experience safety. So when a family arrives to a shelter with their pet, there's an immediate sense of comfort and stability, right? The pet is often a source of comfort and support for the entire family, especially for children who have experienced trauma. So I think one of the most powerful outcomes is what happens in those, first few days when someone comes into shelter. We've seen children relax, we see them smile, smile. We see them like really engage because their pet is with them. And the sense of normalcy, even in the midst of crisis, is incredibly healing. I'll also say that PALS has changed the broader conversation about sort of trauma-informed and survivor-centered, what that really looks like, right? So it challenged us to think differently about the needs of those that we served and to push systems. Because again, the government at that point was not thinking that this was something that was important. But once we were able to do a pilot and show the efficacy of the program, to show the impact on families, to show that there was no harm that would be caused. In fact, we were doing the opposite. We were creating safe spaces for people to experience joy and to celebrate with each other. It then became sort of somewhat of a movement, right? We've also done a lot of technical assistance and training within government agencies and other providers in order to allow folks to open their doors as well and be welcoming to families with pets. So just wanted to also say that we wouldn't be able to do this work, just alone. We did this work due to the support of government and the support of some of our private sector partners when we first launched the program in 2012. So I'm going to pass to Teal, who can provide a little bit more insight on what it looks like boots on the ground.
Yeah, I was going to share an example of a client story just to kind of illustrate all of what Jennifer is saying. We had a survivor many years ago who went through a really horrific, all domestic violence is horrific, and her case was, no different. She entered one of our emergency shelters with her daughter and her cat, and her cat was really like an emotional support animal for her and her daughter, having gone through really awful abuse, almost losing her life. And she was able to remain with her cat. They're still together to this day. But she went through our emergency shelter, which is 6 months, and then she transitioned to one of our transitional sites, which is up to 2 years, and then was able to work with our rapid rehousing program, which was able to place her in her own apartment in Albany, which is amazing. It's not New York City, but that's where she wanted to be. And she's still permanently housed today with her daughter and her cat, and is an advocate for other survivors to be able to bring their pets into shelter. And she speaks of how being able to bring her cat with her into shelter was incredibly healing. And she said she would never have left her situation if she wasn't able to bring her cat with her. And like you mentioned, her cat follows her and her daughter around and makes sure that they're okay. I'm a dog mom. I'm not a cat mom, but I would never leave my dog. I would never leave. She is I have like a bunch of pictures of her right behind my computer. And, I think it's really important for people to feel like, we consider pets as a part of the family. And our belief is like if families are able to stay together, they can heal together. And, when folks are in our shelters, being able to provide them with items for their pets, being able to like provide them with food, or like if they need access to vet care. Sometimes pets are the focus of some of the abuse. And so
I was just about to
yeah.
say that. I have no doubt that
Mhm.
the pets are probably as abused, right?
Yeah. And I think that is like hard for people to hear and acknowledge that is like very intense. But yeah, sometimes the pets are used as a tactic of abuse as children are, and so, and pets can't speak and they can't, say anything. So we want to make sure that the pets aren't left in a dangerous situation. We don't want any member of the family to be left in a dangerous situation. And as Jennifer mentioned, being able to provide that support once they're in shelter, and get them everything that they need and make sure that they have access to everything that so they can fully take care of their pet is really important.
Yeah, we wanted to lift up that program. Like I said, when the team saw that, we have a lot of pet lovers around here, and and recognizing that pets are our family. My kids didn't get pets. I had two kids. I said, you have each other, stay with each other. But
I get that.
so national data shows that intimate partner violence affects more than I'm going to read this slowly, 1 in 3 women, 33% of women, and 1 in 4 men, 25% of men. I'll sidebar, I don't watch The Bachelor, but I bet you all have I'm
Mhm,
sure you all
mhm.
we can sidebar on that, or maybe someone wants to ask a question later on around your thoughts around that, what's going on with The Bachelor season. So 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men in their lifetime with economic abuse present in an estimated 95% of the cases, and rural and low income communities facing some of the highest risk. From your perspective, at URI, what are the outcomes or impacts that stand out as the most meaningful indicators that services like safe shelter, family stability programs, trauma-informed care are helping survivors move towards long-term safety and healing? So I always love asking about data. So just what are some of your indicators? And actually, I'll ask that and then sidebar. I have a really good friend who's a judge in New York City and in Brooklyn, and she and I talked a lot over COVID and the instances of domestic violence um, increasing more over COVID. So I'm wondering, so maybe just so tell me a little bit about how you kind of the first question, what are some of the outcomes and impacts that stand out as the most powerful indicators that your programs are working? And then I'm just curious, just for our own education, can you take us? I mean, it's hard to believe 6 years ago, like today, right? We were in a completely different space, and I'm sure that probably was very scary for many people who were survivors, 33% of women, 25% of men. So it's two different questions. So Jennifer, I'll give you the first one, and maybe Teal, you take the second one about the impacts. Is what are the positive indicators that your programs are working?
Absolutely. So one thing I would like to say is when we think about impact, especially in a space that's so complex like domestic violence and homelessness, it's important to recognize that success isn't just one moment, right? It's a series of steps towards safety, stability, and healing. And so at URI, some of the most meaningful indicators are both like tangible, right, data points, but also deeply human actions. And so, of course, there are concrete outcomes like families transitioning out of our residential programs and moving into permanent housing. So Teal described a really successful case of someone being with their pet and transitioning into permanent housing. Survivors gaining financial independence, right? So doing the work through our economic empowerment program, or even the work through our shelter, helping people connect to jobs, and then successfully navigating the legal system and obtaining certain things like immigration status or an order of protection, right? These are tangible evidences of success. But just as important are sort of the less visible moments that are equally powerful, and they represent signs of healing. So, for example, if a survivor begins to feel a sense of control over her life again, when someone opens a bank account, as Teal talked about this, in their name for the very first time, or returns to work, or returns to school, or starts to plan for their future. Like these are evidences of success. And then, of course, for the children, when you think about children describing that they feel safe, that they're focusing on school and they're doing well in school, they're building friendships in the shelter, they're building friendships in the programs that they participate in, and they're simply just engaging in normalcy again, that those are certainly signs of success for our programming.
Before Teal, I ask you about bringing us back to what life was like 6 years ago. If it was different for you, I'm going to assume that it was in terms of the work you're doing. I just want to put a call out to my colleagues who are on. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we get to them. So what you have a situation where you have the world who couldn't move, and in many cases probably stuck with their abuser in a situation where people were losing their jobs. I mean, so I thought about this as you were talking about the economic empowerment issues or the lack thereof, where people probably were drinking more than normal because you know what was going on. How did you have to change course, or what did that look like for you? And you probably couldn't even get to survivors. Like, what was that like for you guys?
Yeah, and Jennifer can probably answer that better than I can. I've been at URI for 7 years, but she oversaw our DV residential programs during that time. And it was a rough time for service providers. I mean, I think folks remember it was really scary, and we did not close, we did not shut down. Our staff were going to on site every single day, getting COVID, having to stay at the sites for 2 weeks, quarantining from their families. Like the impacts were profound. And I think for survivors in particular, being able to call a hotline to get access, which is how you get access to shelter, was additionally challenging because you're in the same, if you're living with your
Yeah.
the person who's causing you harm, it was very hard to have privacy. Many of us remember working and not having privacy from just like being able to work, right? We live in New York City where apartments are small, it's hard to have privacy. People were not leaving their house. And there was a lot of studies done at the time around people not being able to access public benefits. A lot of survivors were not able to access some of the financial resources that were given out. They share bank accounts with an abuser, and that person would take, the money that was given, to many of us. So I think there were a lot of impacts, and it was really challenging. But I will also want to say, many survivors choose not to leave. Many. It takes someone 7 to 11 times to leave an abusive relationship. And leaving an abusive relationship is by far the most dangerous time for a survivor. 75% of homicides that occur in intimate partner violence relationships are due to somebody trying to leave a relationship. 75%. It's the most dangerous time for a survivor. So this is something, we've grappled with as an advocate community for ever. And COVID has absolutely added a twist to that. And this is something we think about a lot. We also have an abusive partner intervention program, which works with people who are causing harm in relationships.
Yeah, so maybe a little bit
Yeah,
that way. So let's talk a little bit about, not one of the questions, but
yeah.
and I will say you see this all the time, but I had a friend who was murdered by her partner, and had just come back from house hunting. Um, so 75%, yeah. So what so you're obviously you help the survivors, but
Mhm.
we are about systems and kind of
Yeah,
what do you do on the other side of that? And do you
right.
see recidivism is not the right word to use, but is once a survivor, once an abuser, always an abuser, or are there ways that you're working with that side as well?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited we get to talk about this. I think this is often not spoken about enough. We know that ending domestic violence means we can't just work with survivors. Survivors aren't causing abuse. That is important work. And we know that to end domestic violence, we have to work with the people who are causing it. And we actually just had a study released in collaboration with the Urban Institute, which is a notable research institute that did an evaluation of our trauma-informed APEP program and showed that the work that we're doing there is a real promising practice, meaning that none of the people that we worked with in that program who were court mandated to come had any recidivism back into the system on the felony level, or I think even the misdemeanor level. We know that people who are causing harm have often experienced harm and are recreating the patterns that they've seen throughout their life. Many of us have experienced that personally. And through the work that we're doing in group and also individually, people can learn to behave differently, can learn to deal with their triggers and to deal with reducing the tension in the household and really trying to heal and take accountability for what they've done. I think that's a part of it, understanding the impact you've caused on people and making amends to that. That's something our program talks about a lot. We believe that everyone can change and is capable of change with the right circumstances and the right support.
Yeah, I mean, it's a simple term, but hurt people hurt people.
Mhm.
That's kind of how you get there. So we don't have any questions right now. I have one more question, but I'm just going to pull Anita back on because Anita may have. Oh, I mean, Anita, we do have a question. You want to join us for a second and then we'll do the last one? This is so interesting. Thank you, lady. I feel like
Sure.
it's cathartic
Thank
for
you
me,
so much.
actually.
I mean, yes, this was definitely wonderful. And Jennifer, I must say, when you said creating pathways where people are not defined by their worst, most difficult moments, but are supported in reaching their full potential, I mean, that just really, resonates with me. So thank you for that, as well as, those with the pets. I'm a dog person too.
Person
I
who was
would
so excited and said, make sure you highlight pals. That'd be her.
Yes, I wouldn't leave my little teddy, but to stay together so they can heal together, that's also, very, very touching. We do have one question. So the question is, what are some practical ways that workplaces can better support employees who may be affected?
That's a good question. There's a couple of ways, and which is why I'm glad HR is represented here because it's often the resource that our employees, including employees in a nonprofit who may be experiencing challenges as well at home, will go to for support. And so, as a nonprofit, we've also put together sort of lists of resources and community therapeutic programs to help businesses know where to direct people if they're seeking help. Another piece is October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and businesses that use that month to talk about the issue. So inviting speakers like our organization to come in so that you're raising awareness of the issue, and then you're also identifying that there are confidential resources available in the community that employees can engage in. You're also normalizing this, right? So that this is a common issue. This is something that people in all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds, races, ethnic groups have experienced. And so to talk about it is the best solution to ending domestic violence.
I would also just add briefly, there's a bunch of studies done on the number of days that survivors actually miss out on of work and the amount of thousands of dollars of wages lost as a result of experiencing domestic violence, because often people need to take days off, often unpaid, to deal with court cases, go to the hospital, deal with a variety of different issues that come up. So survivors end up paying the price a lot of times to their own abuse. So I think companies can create systems that make it easy for people to access domestic violence leave and time off that is paid for, where people can feel safe to not have to necessarily disclose that to their supervisor, but to someone like people in culture or HR, so that they feel like they have some confidentiality. There's still a lot of stigma around being a survivor of domestic violence in this country. And so people often feel embarrassed or they don't want to talk about it. So creating pathways for people to be able to access safe leave and be able to share this information with a confidential source is probably really helpful.
So we just have a few minutes left, and maybe we'll use the time. We have people on the call. Is there a message that you want to leave our employees with, just about a call to action? What should they know? I don't know who's listening. I think, as you said, this could impact any one of us personally and or people around us. Is there anything that those who could be victims currently should know, and or is there anything that you think people who may be watching someone who is a survivor, words that you think are helpful in helping people to navigate?
I'll just go really quickly. Choice is so important. I think Teal referenced it earlier. And so people may not be ready to leave when you, as a loved one, right, a family member, a best friend, hear a situation and you want to be supportive. The best thing that you can do is is arm people with information. Part of what we do is educate people about options that they have and then do safety planning so that when the time is right, someone could then leave a situation that's causing harm, or still remain and have strategies that they use to keep themselves safe while they're still in that relationship. So that's one piece of advice, which is remember that it's not you, it's somebody else is life, and choice is really important. The other thing that I would love to be able to touch on briefly is that we are living in a challenging time right now where there's uncertainty around funding. And
I was trying to make a decision which one I wanted to go
I'm
with
just
my,
gonna
so
do it really quickly.
take
And
it,
so
take it.
just want to let
And we
folks
just got a
know.
question from someone who, so in the same way, I was trying to figure out how do I want to end? Do I want to
Oh,
end here or there? So you just, let's do
we'll
both.
balance the hopefulness and
Someone just
that
asked how they
in
could also get
resources.
involved. Sorry, someone also wanted to know how could they get involved if their program with your program if they wanted to provide support. So maybe talk about the funding and the funding challenges and what people could do if they want to get involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the programs that our survivors rely on, our housing subsidies, our legal assistance, counseling, workforce development, they're often tied to public funding. And funding will shift year to year, and we're in challenging times right now that make it unpredictable. So this pressure is challenging, not just for the situations that are happening day to day, but it's challenging for organizations for long-term sustainability and stability. So at this time, these challenges though also create opportunities for innovation and partnership. And we're finding new ways to work with corporate partners, community partners, individual donors to address some of these gaps. And so, for example, whether it's, we have legal services and we work with law firms to do pro bono work, or we have business entities that will come into our programming, like our economic empowerment program. I was at a career exploration panel and we had representatives from different financial institutions, and it was just so impactful to our clients to hear about career options and opportunities and to learn about different pathways to independence. And so there are a number of ways in which that we can engage. I will follow up with you a little bit later. We have
You got
a
my
cheat
number.
sheet. Yeah, we have a cheat sheet of all the different ways that people can support our work. I do want to just pass to Teal if there's anything else that she wanted to add before we close.
No, I think you said it all. I think for the people on the call, we had 140 some people. There are survivors on this call. And I think, I just want to reiterate what you said. You know what's best for you. You know what's safest in your situation, and always follow your gut. And I think for the people looking to support the survivors in their life, or the people they're like, why don't they leave that relationship? Patience and being present for people is the most important thing. Non-judgment, being present, acknowledging that that person knows best, they know their situation the best, and just being able to be as present as possible is probably the best thing.
Well, ladies, I'm actually getting all teary-eyed, so
Oh,
thank you so much for such I am actually getting very teary-eyed. Thank you for such an impactful conversation. Oh my gosh. This is the first time someone's made me cry, and I've done like a million of these. Thank you for such an impactful conversation. I do think that this will help somebody. Either those who are on the call now or someone who watches it later. I thank you both. Oh boy. I thank you both for the work that you're doing in your teams. And I'm going to stop crying. So I'm going to ask Lawrence because I've never done this before. I'm going to ask Lawrence if he could just put on the music, and we are going to jam to Miley Cyrus on the way out, because isn't that like the best song for this conversation? So
Absolutely.
thank you both so
Thank
much.
you, Tara, and for your team for inviting us.